however bad they were, Narendra would always be on the phone saying, well, it's not quite as bad as it looks, it could be worse. And then we'd go into a discussion about it. And he was just such a wonderful, decent friend in so many ways. I'm trying to work out exactly when I first met Narendra, but it was sometime in the 1970s. And what impressed me was this sort of lovely, laid-back, smiling character, always with a kind word and always seeing the best in people. And his own personal history and his own determination were incredibly strong. Narendra was born in what he called Malawi, but in reality, when he was born, it was called Nyasaland. The family then moved to what is now called Zimbabwe, was then called Southern Rhodesia, and he grew up in Southern Rhodesia, and the family were very keen that all the sons should come to England. Narendra was the first to come, and I suspect that was because they weren't terribly keen on the politics of Ian Smith and the white supremacist regime in Rhodesia at that time. And he came to Britain and studied in Bradford and eventually made his way to London, where I first met him. And he made this amazing contribution to all of our lives and to all of our society. And Narendra had with him, which he actually hid very well, but this amazing hinterland of the history of the world, the history of the labour movement, the history of the black community in Britain, and the history of so many other struggles around the world, which he would very quickly relate to in any in-depth conversation you ever had with him. But he would always relate it in terms of activism within the community and how we could get together to change things. And I learned so much from Narendra. From the attempts of the National Front to march through Wood Green in 1977, we were all there doing our best to stop them marching through. And I can remember to this day getting a call the day before that big demonstration. I was one of the organisers, along with Bernie and others, of that demonstration, saying, you've got to call this thing off. It's not good for us. It's damaging the image of the Labour Party. You shouldn't be involved in this kind of street activity. It's not what we should be doing. And I said to the person who called me, have you ever read the history of Germany in the 1920s? And he said, what's that got to do with anything? I said, just listen to me. If you don't stand up against the fascists when they're trying to march through our community, they will succeed. You have to stand up against racism in any form, any place, any time. And the work that was done after that in our party and in our communities was very, very important indeed. And I do remember that day in Turnpike Lane in 1981, when there was all kinds of mayhem going on all around us. I was there on Turnpike Lane with Bernie, and then Narendra appeared, goodness knows from where, but he appeared from somewhere. And at that point, Bernie and I took him on one side and said, Narendra, you've got to be a councillor, you've got to be a representative, you've got to come forward into the front line. He said, no, that's not for me. He said, so Bernie was much more blunt than me. I was the diplomatic one. I said, please. I said, well, Narendra, why don't you just go and think about it? Bernie said, no way. He's not going to go and think about it. You tell us now you're going to do it. Otherwise, you're not going home. Bernie was quite direct. And Narendra then, of course, did become a candidate for the neighbouring ward to me on Haringey Council. And we were fellow councillors for actually quite a short time, because I became the MP for Islington North in 1983. And I could see Narendra's patience, his intelligence, and the considerable experience he had of dealing with people that was part and parcel of his life as a representative. He was intensely proud of the community he represented and intensely determined that Haringey Council would achieve things. Selby Trust is part of his legacy. This building is part of his legacy. The fact we're all here is part of his legacy. But the crucial part was actually his work in the campaign to establish black sections in the Labour Party, the right of black self-organisation in the Labour Party. Now, I don't suppose anybody in this room sees that as particularly controversial or significant at the present time, because it isn't now, because it's seen as a natural phenomena, the right of self-organisation. Then it wasn't. It wasn't at all. I was chair of community development in Haringey. Bernie became the chair after me of community development in Haringey. You wouldn't believe the arguments we had about the council funding a Cypriot centre, funding the West Indian Centre, funding any other ethnic community centre, or indeed funding community groups, ethnic community groups. Big arguments, and you shouldn't be doing that. You should bring people together. The argument was it precisely will bring people together because it will enhance the strength and legacy of those communities and lead the second generation to understand where their parents have come from and what their parents went through. And we achieved many of those things, but we didn't achieve them at that stage in the Labour Party. And Bernie was one of those people who was active in the Black Sections campaign, obviously, and Narendra was the chair of it. And he did such a lot of work all over the country in mobilising for it. And when we finally won that whole debate and that argument and got it through Labour Party conference, it was a landmark moment. And when the first 4 black MPs were elected in 1987, Diane, Keith, Bernie and Paul, what an incredible day that was. And I agree absolutely. Narendra should have been the 5th one, because Narendra was somebody that could and did make a massive contribution to politics in Haringey and the politics of the community all over the country. He would also have made such a massive mark in Parliament. But he made his contribution in so many other ways. And I think Seema put it so beautifully when she said that what Narendra did was campaigned to burst open the doors that others may follow. And he stood there to hold that door open that others might walk through it. So what Narendra's legacy is, the inspiration he gave to so many other people of what they could achieve in life. And to me, he was always there as a friend, always there, being very, very supportive. And when I was surprisingly nominated for the leadership campaign in 2015, Narendra was on the phone straight away. What can I do to help? What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? Who do you want to talk to? Straight on it all the time. And when there was a challenge a year later in 2016, he was absolutely there, saying, we've got to hang on to what we won last year. And we did hang on to what we won last year, and indeed we enhanced that majority. I say we, because it was Narendra, it was so many other people that said, we want a politics in this country that challenges the status quo, that challenges inequality, that challenges austerity, that challenges racism in any form whatsoever in society, and a party that mobilises in every community all over this country. So that when we do win a general election, and we will, it'll be the communities that win, it'll be the people that win, that will propel that government into office, and all the struggles we're going to face then to change the face of our society. That's what Narendra's legacy will be. But he was always there to help people in any problem they had. I remember working with him in the health workers' strike in 1982. I was a union organiser at that time. And in the miners' strike in 84, 85, I was very involved, going to speak at miners' events and picket lines and so on. And I had a car that was frankly a load of scrap, and I shouldn't really have had the car. And so he said, we're talking on a Sunday, he said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, I'm going to a picket line at Dungeness Power Station. He said, okay, great. What time is it? I said, well, they've asked me to be there for 6. He said, 6 when? I said, 6 in the morning. He said, how are you going to get there? I said, well, I'm just thinking about that. He said, well, there won't be any trains, won't be any buses at that time. How are you going to do it? So I went home. An hour later, he turns up at my house, knocks on the door, comes in, gives me the keys to his car and said, there you are, take my car tomorrow morning because you need to be there. It's our duty to get you there to support the miners. And it was a freezing cold day, it was snowing all the way there. I indeed did get there at about 5:45 in the morning. I couldn't find the power station because there was so much snow and stuff around. I wound down the window to find the only person in the street. I said, where is it? And he sort of gave me directions. Anyway, so I wound down the window, the snow was blowing in the car, and the window wouldn't wind up again. But it wouldn't wind up again all day. So we got back to London early afternoon, and so Narendra phoned up, said, "How did it go?" And I said, "Well, it was a bit cold, and my teeth were chattering so much I could hardly speak." And he said, "How's the car?" I said, "It's great. We'll have to clear the snow out of it before you pick it up." But it was just Narendra there, being a comrade, being helpful, and being supportive. And his family obviously suffering terribly at the present time. Just think about it. It's less than 2 weeks since Narendra died, and the shock of that news when Seema called me that night. And it's a very, very difficult time for them. So put your arms around all of Narendra's family, of whom he was so proud. And when we had the prayer event in Harrow last week, there were hundreds of people there because they were so proud of Narendra as part of that community, as indeed there are lots of us here tonight, very, very proud of what Narendra achieved. He was a man of many parts. He loved cricket. He loved talking about cricket. He loved watching cricket. And he understood what C.L.R. James wrote about cricket. He understood what Mike Marquis wrote about cricket, the way in which cricket can be a symbol of struggle against oppression and colonialism, and can be simply a joy as a game. But the significance of it, for those that have been through the problems of the British Empire and the anti-colonial struggle, actually has quite deep meaning. Narendra fully understood that. And I loved being able to talk to him, listen to him, and work with him on so many different issues and causes. So, tonight, we say thank you to Narendra for his life, for his warmth, for his wit, for his smile, for his happiness and his cheerfulness, and his deep-seated optimism, for his absolute determination to destroy racism in any form in our society. And we have to recognise that for all the achievements that we've made, and they are considerable, the threat of the rise of the far right is very serious across Europe and in other places. Are we going to allow the far right to rise? Are we going to allow the xenophobes to take over? Or are we going to ensure we develop into an outward-looking, inclusive, multicultural, multi-faith society? And are we going to develop into a society where socialism and social justice are the core of our very thinking, and a society that includes all? Narendra taught us a lot in his life. He didn't realise how influential he was. He didn't realise how much he had taught us, because he lived his life in a very modest and quite simple way. But he wanted others to be able to live their own lives in a decent, modest and simple way. So he wasn't one who would pass by on the other side to the homeless and those that had lost out so much in society. He wanted to make sure we were actually there and looking after everybody. What Joe said and what so many others have said tonight is so true about Narendra. We're not going to see him again or his like again. But we are, in a sense, all the beneficiaries of his life. And we're all the better for knowing him, knowing his decency, knowing his principles, knowing his warmth, and knowing the way that he inspired and encouraged others. So when we had the young counsellors speaking here tonight, when we've had old friends speaking here tonight, we had people that have just got to know him actually relatively recently, I think that's a fantastic thing. A good, wonderful, loyal, and decent friend of mine for over 40 years. I'm deeply saddened at his passing, but in his memory, Narendra, we will create that decent world. We will win that election. We will get a Labour government. We will get a government that will work for everybody, and we will defeat the far right in our society and be proud of our history, proud of our struggles, proud, very proud of our diversity in all its forms. Narendra, I thank you for everything you did, all the friendship you gave us, and the inspiration you've been to so many of us here. Tonight is a sad, very, very sad occasion, but in many ways, this document shows just what a wonderful man Narendra was, what a wonderful life he gave to all of us. Thank you very much.